Thank you, Daryl, for having me, and AUSN for hosting this conference. My name is James Owens, and I told you a little bit about my background. I'm really here to talk to you today about a story, and it's the story of, really in my life, how the kernel or seed of an idea, once expressed in words, through thought to words, can become a reality. And in the case of what I'm working on with The World is Just a Book Away, or the acronym which is WIJABA, has really become a miraculous journey. The idea started with an idea for a simple book, The World is Just a Book Away. And the idea was to interview prominent people from around the world about books that inspired them and why, and the role reading played in their life. And very probably, I could say naively, I thought I would finish this book in a year, of course having no realistic sense of how difficult it would be to reach His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or President Gorbachev, or people of that stature. So I started the book in 2002, and that was simply the idea. I thought it would take me a year to complete this book. It took me 15 years to complete this book. There are submissions from 60 people, alphabetically ranging from the astronaut Buzz Aldrin to the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Mohammed Yunus. And in that process of doing the book, one of our board members, this is later, referred Ryan to me, and Ryan Ackland, who's the assistant director and who's also the artist behind the portraits you'll see. So the book includes people such as Dr. Jane Goodall, and I think given that we're here for the purposes of bioethics, we all know what a hero Jane is in the world. And truly, she is the woman who changed the definition of the word man when she proved that chimpanzees use tools about 60 years ago. So she was quite young at that time. She's about to turn 85 in April. So this is an example of one of the submissions. This is Dr. Jane Goodall and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who, as you all know, I'm sure, won the Nobel Peace Prize. And also there are many actors and people involved in Hollywood, including Lauren Bacall. So these 60 submissions are compiled into this book about how and why books have inspired prominent people. This led me to another idea, which was, if I've been given connection to all of these prominent people, was there something bigger to do than a book? And that idea came to me in 2008, that I was meant to donate the proceeds from the book to a charity. But then I thought, well, since I've been given the connection to all these prominent people, perhaps it would be of most service if I started a charity. So I decided to start a charity by the same name as the book, The World is Just a Book Away, or WIJABA, to build a library for children in Indonesia. And this is an example of one of our libraries. And as you can tell, they're very colorful. We bring books to children who have had no access to books. Certainly not storybooks. They might have school books, but they have no access to storybooks typically. And this is what the libraries looked like before. The initial idea, as I said, was to go and build one library in Indonesia, in a region called Sidoarjo, which most people haven't heard of probably. Sidoarjo experienced the worst mud flow disaster in the world. It can actually be seen from space. And over 17 villages went under the mud. The net result was the children who were in that region in eastern Java, of course their villages were destroyed, and the other schools, as you can tell, are typically in very bad states of disrepair. So we decided that we would build, and we'll just pause it that way, we decided that we would build one library for these children in Sidoarjo. And that was in 2008. The first library opened in 2009. You saw the before pictures, and this is what the after pictures look like. By the way, I do want to mention this girl, the Western girl you see cutting the ribbon with the two Indonesian children, her name is Sibella Moffat. She raised the funds to build her first library when she was 14 years old. And she's 18 now, and she's raising the funds for her fourth library by selling lemonade and cookies and making bracelets. And so this is the most recent library that she opened in Indonesia. And as you can tell, there's a great use of colors, blue representing water, yellow representing the sun, and green representing earth. And on the walls of all the libraries, we have pictures of endangered species of Indonesia. And you can probably see there's a little plaque here, and it tells the children about the animal and how many of the animal species are left in Indonesia. Then another idea came because so many schools asked us to build libraries, and we can't build as many libraries as the schools who want them. But we have a hub office. We started with one hub office. We now have 3 hub offices in Indonesia. And the idea was, what if we had a mobile library? And the mobile library would visit 50 schools from our depot and bring a crate of 100 books each month to those schools. So that was the idea. And then I thought, well, I really want the children to be really, literally, the idea that came to me was hands-on. And then we created the mobile library with the children, non-toxic paint, that has the children's handprints all over the mobile library. And then you can see this is in Bali, which became our 3rd hub in Indonesia. And then this mobile library goes all over the island of Bali, which is approximately the size of Connecticut. There are over 80 orphanages, and about 40 of which want to work with us. So we will be working with all the orphanages of Bali that are able to work with us to provide books for children. And you can see this is our mobile library in Sidoarjo. That's how the books are delivered monthly. And then we had another idea. So by this time, right now in 2020, we have 100 libraries and 5 educational programs, 3 mobile libraries, 1 horse library, and we have served over 120,000 children. And the idea came since we had these hubs, 3 in Indonesia, 1 in Mexico, and they're starting one in Los Angeles. What if we superimposed a program onto that, since we had the relationship with the schools, to provide them with an environmental education program, to teach them more about bioethics, environmental stewardship, how to become environmental stewards. So Jane Goodall is in my book, and Jane wrote the foreword of my book actually, and I was talking to Jane, and for her 80th birthday, I asked her if we could, in honor of her 80th birthday, launch an environmental education program at 80 schools in Indonesia. Jane has a Roots and Shoots program through the Jane Goodall Institute that is, I think, in over 140 countries. She truly is one of the most amazing people alive and one of our best defenders of the environment. And Jane said, yes, absolutely. So that was an idea. And that idea evolved into WIJABA's environmental education program in partnership with Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots. And as I said, Roots and Shoots is present in over 140 countries, but they didn't have a strong presence in Indonesia. We had 3 key areas in Sumatra, Java, and Bali, with which we have relationships with governmental offices. So we decided to launch this program. Part of the program, it's a 4-week program. There are 4 modules. Children learn in general about the environment and bioethics, about flora, fauna, and then how to actually take action, how to be environmental stewards. And as part of the final part, they plant trees. They're also educated about plastic, but as you probably know and can see, Plastic is so prevalent that it still makes its way into this, but we're making a lot of progress with that. This particular tree is the 1,000th tree that was planted by children in Indonesia through this program, and it is called James Tree. It has you can see this is Dr. Jane Goodall's tree. It was the 1,000th tree we planted, the children planted in Indonesia. They recycle, they collect garbage, they recycle plastic. You can see here with a lot of the recycling. There isn't a culture of garbage cans in most of these regions. They tend to take the plastic and throw it on the ground. They're learning a lot about that, and they're doing a lot of recycling, and they even now have a Bottles for Books program. They collect bottles and recycle them to buy books for the libraries. Net, what is the result? What has WIJABA done through the help of many and through our board, advisory board, and the help of people in the book? Since we launched in 2009 our first library, we've served approximately 125,000 children. As I said, we have over 100 libraries in 3 countries. We have 3 mobile libraries that have currently served almost 50,000 kids. We're about to launch the 4th mobile library on the island of Flores in Indonesia, which is near, well, you probably have heard of the Komodo dragon. It's very near to where the Komodo dragon lives on Flores and Komodo. Our horse library goes up a volcano, or we call him the horseman of Java. He goes up a volcano with a horse to 10 schools that would be difficult to reach otherwise, to deliver books to the children. Our partnership with Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots has taken more than 25,000 children through the environmental education program. Another 16,500 children at 515 schools minimum will go through it this year, with the intention of establishing Jane Goodall's student-led Roots and Shoots chapters, clubs at each school. That's what we're working on now. The children have planted nearly 4,000 trees, which I think is amazing for their biophilia. They actually touch the soil and they use the compost. As you can see, the children have used over 8,000 kilos of compost, and they have recycled over 1,000 kilos of plastic. And at the end of the day, I told you I was going to tell you a story about a thought, and how a thought spoken as words can turn into reality. The thought for me was initially to write a book about the books that inspired prominent people. That led to a thought about building one library for children, which led to the mobile library and now our largest program, the environmental education program. But when all is said and done, for me what it truly comes down to is one. It's difficult to conceptualize 125,000 children for me. I can't draw a picture of them really. I know it's roughly the population of Berkeley, California. But for me, it's easier to conceptualize the importance that this work has in the life of one child. So it's one book, one library, one program, one child at a time. And I believe if we dedicate ourselves to doing this type of work and to helping people, and particularly children, on the grassroots level, we have the potential to change the world. Thank you. Are there any questions I can answer for you?
Yes, please. Who would like to ask the first question?
What age groups do you deal with?
Well, I didn't mention that. We actually currently we deal with primary school age children, because I'm sure, as you know, the statistics show that if you really want to build lifelong learning and lifelong reading, it's very important that you start in early childhood. So currently, because the need is so massive at every level, we have to choose where to focus, and we focus on primary school age children.
Have you thought about going to other countries where they need more libraries?
Yes, it's not a challenge in terms of thinking about going to other countries, because in fact we're asked to go to other countries very frequently. Or people will say I'm building a school or a project in a different country. But what I've done a lot of research around this, and we've worked with people who've done a lot of research around this. These type of projects, according to my research and according to our data from 10 years of experience, do not typically work if they are one-off projects, because there's no partnership with the community. And it would be more of what I would call, it's just the word that comes to mind would be sort of colonial philanthropy. As in, I am operating under the perception that I know what is needed by the community, and I go in, or we go in, build it and leave. But of course, like you described the changes in Nepal, communities, people, populations, it's very fluid. Things change. So when you build a library at a school, and we don't own these libraries, they're seconded legally to the schools. When you build a library at the school, what happens when the librarian that you help to train leaves? What happens when the headmaster who was in charge of the program leaves? So we do not go into regions to build one-offs. When we go into a region, it means we're going to commit to build a minimum of 25 in that region. Eventually have a regional office, and that those libraries will be visited every month, and that we partner with all the school committees and the teachers and parents committees, and we conduct a training every year, very much based on what they want and what they need. And in my experience, that's the only way this will really work in the long term. Because you saw the state of the buildings we deal with when we go in. That's not just because of misuse, it's because the climate is incredibly harsh and people simply don't have the resources to, or the schools don't have the resources. So another thing we found is that after year 4, typically, the library is in some state of deterioration, the insects eat the wood, etc. We talk to the school, what do you need? We partner with them, and they typically provide the labor, we provide the materials, and then we refurbish the library. And we're constantly replenishing the books. I mentioned the mobile library, but also our mobile libraries deliver, instead of having to buy 2,000 books for each library after they're established with about 500, the mobile library depot will deliver a topic-specific crate of books every month to all of our physical libraries, meaning each of them in 9 academic months has 900 additional books for the kids per year, but we can do that by buying 5,000 books and rotating them instead of buying thousands of books per library. So that hub system is really central to our concept and why it's been so successful and long-term. And the reason we have the relationship with the educational departments, so the partnership, that allowed us to launch this program with Jane Goodall. If we didn't have those relationships, it wouldn't be possible to just roll out to 80 schools, expand to 250, and now 515. That's based on long-term relationships and trust, which is really important, that they trust that you're there for them. You know this from your work.
So just a comment, if you ever wish to come to Nepal, then we can really partner together, and my non-profit, which is Youth UNESCO Club, has now, they were my board of governors or board of directors. They are now in the House of Parliament. So, including one Mahesh Pasnet, one of the guy who was also became the minister. So we work together closely. So just feel free. Let's talk, or you can always use the resources in Nepal. So I'm always open to.
Yes, and you mentioned a very interesting point that was central to WIJABA's strategy from the beginning, which is that we will not, certainly not while I'm at the helm, we will not ever go to a country in which we don't have a strong local partner. So in Indonesia, we're very blessed to have a very prominent Indonesian who runs the charity in Indonesia. We have the same situation in Mexico, so that when we have logistical problems, these people have all the connections to know who to call to solve the problems that I would never have the ability to do. I think it would be naive for me to enter, and I'm sure you know the statistics on how much of American philanthropic funds do not end up doing what's intended because people have good ideas, but maybe the strategy isn't right. So thank you for sharing that. As you know, I love Nepal. We discussed it. I intended to go to Nepal for 2 weeks, and I spent 6 weeks there. One of my favorite countries in the world. And in fact, thinking back to it, my idea of building a library, although I can find it in a lifeline I wrote when I was 17, that I would build I would build schools for children in my life. I wrote on my lifeline when I was 17. When I was trekking in Nepal and going through the villages, it was accompanied by a certain degree of embarrassment, I would say, because I remember reading that the per capita income, if I'm recalling correctly, in Nepal at that time was about $240. That was per year. That was almost the exact price of my Vuarnet sunglasses. Now, that was a big purchase for me at that time, and I love those sunglasses. But the feeling that I was wearing sunglasses that constituted the annual income, the per capita income of a person, that idea caused me some degree of distress and discord. As you know, it's really hard to process that. How can I be wearing sunglasses that cost as much as a person makes in a year? And then I could go through my backpack, my boots, and all the other stuff I had with me. And I saw this beautiful, I have a photograph of her somewhere, this beautiful little girl in a village, but there wasn't good hygiene, let's say, in that village, and so she had, from mucus from her nose, she had a sore here, and I think they didn't have good access to water way up in the mountains. And I looked at her and I just thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we could provide books to children like this? Because if my sunglasses cost as much as a per capita income, I'm sure it wouldn't be that difficult to build a library and bring in books. So actually it was while on that trek in Nepal on the Annapurna range, which you mentioned, that the idea started moving more in my brain. But that was years before, that was in '94, so that was I launched WIJABA in 2008. So I think it would be very poetic if we went to Nepal at some point. And my ultimate purpose in life, as I view it, is to be in service of children, as I'm called to do. So if we feel that the calling is meant to take us to Nepal, then I would gladly follow that.
Yeah, because when I was working with a non-profit, I came to meet with many people. Still, we have some negative impression of politicians in our country. The politicians, that they don't do their work or they are corrupted. But I can trust those people who were in my non-profit or whom we work together in the community. Now they are in a place, they are the member of the parliament, and they are running the government, they are making the policies. I think it's a good time if we can help from, or any one of us can help those children.
Absolutely, and the children of the world. Because, as I think I mentioned earlier to your question, there's so much data and so much research around this that if we can facilitate the process of children reading at an early age, the statistical probability of enabling them to become the custodians of their destiny, to change their destiny, it increases exponentially. But of course, it's heartbreaking because so many of these children have no access. The first library we opened in Indonesia, I can't speak Bahasa, which is what they refer to the language as Bahasa, the unifying language. And my interpreter said, oh, this little boy was talking to me, he said, oh, he's never seen a book. And the man who was interpreting for me, who's the CFO of our charity, has an MBA from America. He's very educated, so I didn't think he'd make a translation mistake, but I couldn't quite grasp that the child hadn't seen a book. So I said to him, do you mean he's never owned a book? And he said, no, he's seen school books with text, but he's never seen a storybook. And you know how much I paid? $1.25 for that. I remember. Now we pay about $1.75. That book was $1.25. And so that's what really inspires me to do this. Children all over the world, one child at a time, if we can get them something that they deserve. Especially for me, in my opinion, books which allow them to imagine and travel, then beautiful.
Okay, Carla first, then Suma.
So the books, they're wonderful, what we're seeing here. Where do they come from? Do you create books? Are they gathered from local authors? Do you have them printed? Are they already printed? All of this.
The reason that I'm laughing is because there's another bubble that we could add that came from Ryan and my discussion about, because Ryan's an artist, and I think you were able to see, she did those portraits that you saw of Jane and Desmond Tutu and Lauren Bacall. She did all the portraits in the book. We've talked about co-creating books in which I would write the story and Ryan would do the illustrations. So that's something in the plans, what I call AD, after dissertation. I can't take on any new projects until after dissertation. Currently, to answer your question more directly, Indonesia has a very high, as I understand it, import tax on books. That's one challenge. Secondly, Bahasa is the language of Indonesia, but as far as I know, of no other country. So the books, and third, there are many, I don't even know how many, I think over 300, is it 300 or 700? There are hundreds of languages in Indonesia. So the children, and over 17,000 islands. So already when the children go to school, they're being educated in Bahasa, which is not their first language, it's their second language. And we tried to introduce books in English, but the books in English, for the children we deal with, you have to remember we're not in the cities, we're in typically very poor communities that might be around the cities. The children they have English class, but it's basically hello, how are you? They're not good. We found that the books in English don't really benefit them. So the way we structured this, because it's all, for us, we always say it's all about the children. We did focus groups with the children. And that was a very interesting process to understand the culture, because we had all the boys and girls from all classes together and the teachers. And what kind of books would you want? And then I was there for the first one and I heard biologica, geologica, something like matematica, and I'm thinking, this is not working. We have to change the structure and do this without teachers. So we very politely said to the teachers we wanted to do a focus group with them individually, and then we just had all the kids together, boys, girls, older, younger, only the older boys spoke. Separate. Boys, girls, only the older boys spoke, and only the older girls spoke. Separate, older boys, older girls, younger girls, we got our answers. So the children actually went through catalogs of books and picked books that they would like to read. And then we had educational experts here who also went through the catalogs and looked at books that we thought would help their learning. But it is based fundamentally on the philosophy that it's important that children read. It's more important that children develop a love of reading than we try to force them to read a certain
And
topic.
they translate these books into Bahasa?
The books are in Bahasa. The books we buy are in Bahasa, published in Indonesia. Many of them are based on, there's not a strong written culture in Indonesia, it's more of an oral culture. So many of the books are based on Western books. And for example, Winnie the Pooh is incredibly popular, as is Cinderella. But then they also, when the children write cards every year, we find that they love stories about their own local heroes, which are also incorporated. So very much a learning process. Every time I think I understand something, we start to do it, and then I learn something else.
Suma, please.
I'm from Malaysia, and I
We
moved.
didn't meet by the way.
Yeah, it's a one.
Yes.
I'm from Malaysia, and I moved from West to East Malaysia, and I worked with Humana schools. I don't know whether you've heard of this word Humana. I think a Dutchman started this schools for stateless children, and there are more than 150,000 stateless Indonesian children in East Malaysia whose parents are working as laborers for the estates in Malaysia, and they do not have books to read. They are in a worse situation because they are not neither. They don't even have what do you call it? They are neither Malaysian nor Indonesian. So they don't have even what do you call it?
A nationality.
A nationality. So after when I went to teach or train the teachers there, I noticed that these children are actually lost completely for life because they cannot go here and there. So since you're already working with Indonesian children, I was wondering whether we could connect, because the government will definitely know of these kids who are now working with in Humana schools.
I certainly, I would love to go help the children everywhere in the world. So one of our challenges is we have to stay focused on this hub model. It seems to me that that's a very logical and probably relatively easy one for us to do, because we have 20 staff members and we have 20 people working for us in Indonesia, and the country manager is based in Sidoarjo, so very close to Malaysia. And it would be interesting to learn more. For example, these children who are ethnically Indonesian, but as you know, Indonesian, it's really what the Dutch created, right? So they are actually Javanese or Batak, or what is their language? And do the children even have a unifying language?
Bahasa.
They all speak Bahasa.
Bahasa.
Okay, that's good to know. They all speak Bahasa. So again, let's stay in touch. And I mean, as you know, when I started this, I was told not to start it. My advisor said, do not start a charity because you're a missionary by nature and you're going to have to become a fundraiser. And the rest of your life will be spent fundraising. And she was right. I haven't even been to Indonesia to see the kids in 4 years, so I hope to go back this year. So funding is always a question, but I think that's I didn't know about this group of children. I think it's a very logical extension and probably one of the easier extensions for us to do because the countries border each other. So I hope that we can stay in touch. Thank you. Anything else?
Sumo is also a former principal of a school, so
great.
she's doing our PhD and
You have a lot of
we'll
experience.
be cooperate, yeah.
Yeah, and I think these kids don't belong to Indonesia or Malaysia at the moment, and it's worse than the situation that children in Indonesia are.
Every time you think a situation is worse, then you hear about one that's worse than the worst. It's, yeah, I would say another way, what came to me when you were saying that, they don't belong to Malaysia, they don't belong to Indonesia, but in fact they belong to all of us, as all children do, right? I think that all of us who are here with the desire to serve others. So if we can do something, if the model works and if we could have the funding, again, that's something I would be very open to exploring. And of all the partnerships we could do, Malaysia would probably be the easiest one for us to transition, especially with the Bahasa speaking population in Malaysia. Yeah, let's stay in touch and see, and God willing, help the children, right?
That's a prayer as well, answer to my prayer, because I left East Malaysia and every time I'm thinking how to help them, and books, I have to do it physically on my own. I don't have a group of people to help me to even get books which I used books to pass it to them.
Yeah. Yes, and as you know from the population, because we tried to use English books going over them, but they weren't useful. We need the books in Bahasa for the children, because it's already for most of them their second language. But I always say God doesn't make mistakes. It's I think it's things that happen or have divine intervention for me anyway. When the Dalai Lama appeared in my book, and it took me 10 years to get the Dalai Lama, and 10 years to get President Gorbachev. And the Dalai Lama came, Ryan, was it 2 or 3 days before the deadline? Just before the book. In fact, we held the book from press because there was Archbishop Tutu had referred me, and there was it's looking good, it's looking good. I said, can you please hold the press? Can you please hold the press? And either 2 days or 1 day before we had to go to press, His Holiness, his office sent the submission for the book. And so ever since then I say if the Dalai Lama can appear in my book, anything can happen. Because for me that truly was a miracle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, is there any scientific evidence that your programs work?
I don't know, is there? I do know, actually. I do know because my dissertation is, we're very fortunate, again, this has to do with having a program office that's in place for so many years. Well, we have the pre and post questionnaires from, we have 8,000 data points right now, very strong data points, including 4,000 pairs of pre and post questionnaire, Likert scale questions, 24 of the 25 questions are Likert scale, and the data, which is being run by our statistician now currently both for my dissertation and for the charity, shows not just a slight increase based on this 4-week intervention, but an enormous increase in the children's knowledge about flora, fauna, the general environment, and perhaps most importantly, desire and ability to take action. So we do have a lot of data that now demonstrates the efficacy of the program, which I always have to go back and acknowledge Dr. Jane Goodall for, of course, because the idea behind all of this is Jane's research and the data from the program that we built off of for the Children in this partnership.
And do the children talk about it to their parents? Is there any assessment of the parents?
That is something I'll say qualitative yes, they do. Getting the parent surveys, and this is not just true for WIJABA, it's true for many organizations, is a more tricky process. We have fewer and we don't have, for the data for 2018, which is being examined, we don't have data that's as concrete, but we now, for the program has been launched in 2020, we have systems in place to have really a systematized way of getting the parent data so that we have the statistics to demonstrate that the knowledge is being transmitted from the children to the families and then spreading through the community. To summarize, qualitatively, we very much have the indications that the children are sharing the data. Quantitatively, I firmly believe that will be demonstrated through the data we will be receiving in the next couple of months.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Okay.
Thank you very much. We applaud
you.
your work.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.